Welcome to Gazpacho and Fresh Bread. My name is Mike Scott. I'm with Farm Table Foundation, the program director there, and delightful to see you all tonight. Our mission is our purpose is to rekindle connections between people and local food, local farmers, and the land. And one of the ways we do that is by supporting farmers who are growing really good food in the area through our restaurant, and also the kinds of food we teach people about cooking. And so right now, of course, seasonal things include tomatoes. And we've got Terry Kelzer tonight to teach us about gazpacho, but also a fresh bread that she loves to make in the summer for sandwiches and so on that goes well with the soup. So delightful to have you all here. I think you all probably are familiar with using your mute button. We'll keep the mute on the lower left. But if you want to turn your video off or on, you can do that, the lower left corner of that Zoom screen. And then, of course, the chat box where you can type in a question and I'll convey those to Terry. So feel free to type those in at any point, and I'll interject when we need to hear from Terry. So Terry, of course, has been at this for years, and it's always a delight to spend some time with you, Terry. And feel free to jump in and let us know how to do gazpacho and fresh bread. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Okay, welcome everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. We are going to celebrate the summer today. Gazpacho is described as summer in a bowl. I recall there was a song by Greg Brown, a folk singer, and it was a wonderful song about grandma put summer in a jar, and I sort of equate this a little bit with we're putting a summer in a bowl. And this is actually a really old classic recipe, which makes it one of my favorites when things have a great history to them. And this supposedly goes back to the Romans, and when the Romans were traveling through doing their marauding and through the like 12th, it was before before thousands of years ago, and they would take bread and garlic, olive oil, and vinegar, and that would all get packed into your saddlebag. And as you would get up on your horse and you would ride all day, that stuff would just be working and working in there. And when you stopped for lunch, you would just dump some out, and there you go, fast food for the soldiers. And it traveled to Spain, where it was really popular. As time went by, people used mortar and pestle, maybe a little bit nicer than eating out of a sandbag. So it has a great history. And we're going to start with, it's such an easy thing to make, and of course you can use any vegetables that you want. There's people that make green gazpacho, white gazpacho. Tonight we'll do the most common is the Andalusian tomato gazpacho. And you start with bread. The bread never left. And I'm using some of my sourdough bread that I made last weekend. If your bread is really crusty, you might want to take the crust off, but it's not, mine isn't. It's relatively soft. And that's how we start. And then we're going to start with cloves. And each layer as we go, we're going to put just a little sprinkle of salt. I'm going to go to the onions next. On the recipe it says a red onion or bunches of green onions. You know, it's whatever you like and whatever you have. The red onion I made it with on the weekend, and I just felt it was a little strong, so I wanted to go with something that was a little milder, and so I went to the green onions here. And I'm just going to chop those up.
And Terry, before you go any further, I wanted to mention to everybody too that you might see that there are two videos that say Terry Kelzer. The one on that you're seeing right now, the main screen. You can also see her hands more closely if you double click on the other screen that says Terry Kelzer. So if you double click on that, your view should shift and you can see more close up what Terry is chopping, what her hands are doing. So feel free to try that, double click on that screen, and then you can double click back on the screen that shows Terry from the front. So that's just a way to get to see a bit more closely what she's doing with her hands, if that's helpful. And you can toggle between those views by double clicking on them. Thanks, Terry.
Overdue green peppers can be fairly strong. And we're just gonna add a little more salt. I'm just gonna save those. I think that's enough. And I'll do a bit of red pepper.
So Terry, you started out with bread, is that correct?
Yes, our first layer is bread. You want a good solid bread, like a sourdough. We're just gonna, one of our main flavors, the cucumbers.
What purpose does that bread serve?
The bread is kind of a binder, holds it together. You want to use a garden cucumbers if you can. The English cucumbers are a little dry. It's nice to have these really moist cucumbers. When I grew up, my mother, she always said cucumbers, she told us kids, cucumbers were poisonous, so you had to cut them in half and you had to do this. And then you could eat them. And then I came to find out that wives' tail actually does get some more, it is known by people other than my mother. And you're going to take out the seeds. I was going to say about using a garden cucumber is much better than an English cucumber because they're a bit dry and you want moisture here. So I'm just taking out the seeds. And then we're just rough cut them. And the thing about it is it tastes so fresh and you get all the vitamins and minerals of all the fresh vegetables. Cucumbers. Now we're going to salt those a little bit. Okay. A little bit. All right. Right place. And I've seen where people, they peel the tomatoes first, which you can do. And I've seen people that peel them and seed them. But the whole idea is to get the whole nutrients, all the nutrients of the tomato. Good homegrown tomatoes here. They're so ripe and they spoil really fast. It's a good thing the class is today because tomorrow I might have lost a few more. And these are beef steaks. And I have one heirloom here. Okay, all right, and then we want to add a little olive oil. You want a really good, sweet, organic, cold-pressed olive oil. This is one that they were selling at the farm table. It's a really nice Italian olive oil. And pepper. And I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar. You don't really necessarily need it, but sometimes it kind of smooths the flavor. And then I have some smoked paprika. And then I have a little bit of Hungarian half-sharp paprika. I didn't use any jalapeno. You could, that would spice it up nicely. This half-sharp paprika also has a little bit of heat, not too much. And we'll put the cover on here. Now, how smooth or how chunky you want is a personal matter. If you, I like to make it a little bit smoother, and then you add like some chopped cucumber, tomato, little things to decorate the top, and that gives you some crunchiness too. It's up to you. It's very fast. I think we're gonna just take a little taste here and see what it might be needing. I do need some wine vinegar in there. It's good. And it's about 1/4 of a cup. I got this nice organic wine vinegar. Has a really good flavor, I think. So you can have that. I'm going to, I can kind of show you. It's smooth, but yet it still has crunchiness in it. Hand me one of those sucrose there. And then how you might plate it. There's all there is to it. And we put it in a plate like so. And then I'll let you take it there. Yeah. You can add little bits of cucumber at the top. So croutons are nice. And what I did was I made a kind of a garlicky crouton with some of that sourdough bread this morning. And then you can add, I think, yeah, we need a little green color here. So I'm going to just do a quick chip nod. We're just going to roll up our basil. And put some fresh basil on top. And that should be our soup. And taste just, everything is so fresh and cool for a hot and muggy day like today. I think it'd be wonderful. And sometimes people like it to be darker red, and they add some cooked tomato to it or some tomato paste. It's all what, you know, how you want it to look, but that works too. So that is our very simple gazpacho. Any questions at all? Anyone? I think
I've got a question, Terry. Are there variations in terms of like favorite tastes that other people like to have in that aren't in your recipe, for example?
You know, you can go like kind of have more of a Mexican flavor, and you can do some toasted ground cumin in there and top it with cilantro. That'd be really nice. You can just any flavors that you like, any herbs that are growing in your garden that you want to use. Oregano, rosemary also would be nice.
Thank you.
Yes, let me see if you can. Okay. Yeah, I don't need that either. So we'll just clear off, and I have an interesting story about our bread today. I had quite an interesting day starting out this morning. I make a loaf of bread ahead of time, and I took my yeast out of the refrigerator and promptly dropped the jar on the floor and broke the jar. And of course, there wasn't a lot of yeast in it, but there was maybe a fourth of a cup or so. So that all had to be tossed away. And I went to my big freezer to see I knew I had more yeast, but I didn't realize what I had was this premium high-powered instant yeast. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a story about yeast. There's basically active dry yeast. Besides the active dry yeast is what people use mostly, or instant dry yeast. Active dry yeast usually means you have to activate it because it's very susceptible to temperature. It goes bad quickly, and so that's one of the reasons I never advise people to buy regular active dry yeast, because you don't know if it's any good. You have to set it in a liquid, see if it gets bubbly. It could be out of date so quickly at a store. Although this, with the pandemic, I think every bit of yeast was gone off the shelves. So, do you want to take that away? And I'll move over this.
Terry, we also had a question about the knife and the cutting bowl you were using for the basil. If you could just mention what that is, or.
Yeah, that's a mezzaluna. They usually come with a really nice board like this, and this is your knife for it, and it works just really slick with any kind of herbs that you want to fix up. I recommend it. I think they're just totally cool.
And what did you call it?
Mezzaluna. Mezzaluna with a board. That's what you call this knife. And most all cooking stores have them. Okay. All right, so here I am with I have, usually my yeast is instant yeast. What I took out of the freezer this morning was called high-power instant yeast. This is wonderful yeast for breads that only raise one time, for like sweet rolls and things. It really does well with sugar. It's super active. And so I put it in my new jar. Okay. Maybe can you take this I got one more. Thank you. Okay. So the story, if you're clear on yeast, there is active yeast, which you should kind of start and see if it'll bubble. There is instant yeast, which can go right into the dough or the flour and mix with the flour. It's really hardy. It will last for years in the freezer. It's an amazing product. And then when I saw this super instant yeast, I just had to have it and try it out. And it does what it says it does. It's super fast. And with this particular bread, it will raise the bread very quickly. This particular bread is called tangzhong. Let's set this aside for a minute. Bring this over. I wanted to just read off a couple of these things about the difference between the two yeasts, just because I thought it was quite important. And I always forget some of the things, but the basic active dry yeast is highly perishable. Always check the expiration date before you use it. Potency can vary over time, producing inconsistent results. Should be rehydrated before you use it, and it's easily damaged by your liquid being too hot. Suitable for cold-proof doughs, though. If you have things that you want a long, slow rise overnight, and the active yeast would be good. And then the thing with the instant yeast, it's extremely stable, consistent behavior over time, tolerant of temperatures almost up to 130, which is quite amazing. But a lot of times it's easy to get your liquid a little too warm. Suitable for recipes that require more than one raise. And the brands I always like are Red Star. Now, this bread, tangzhong sandwich bread, is also known as milk bread. And it has a base of milk, and it has a water roux. And I'm going to have Nubia cook this up for us. But you start with a cup of water, 1/4 cup of flour, and using bread flour, and I'll just show you basically like so. And then I'm going to have Nubia take over and cook this for us. It takes about 3 minutes to cook up. And meanwhile, I'm going to start our milk bread with the cup of milk. Now, this recipe calls for 1.5 cups of yeast, or not 1.5 cups, 1.5 tablespoons. And I think with this particular yeast, I'm going to go a little bit short of a tablespoon. And then our recipe calls for 1/4 cup of sugar. And then give me that whole portion. And so this, you can see, it would make a really wonderful quick sweet rolls. Anytime I would totally recommend this recipe. Even I talked with Sue at the farm table, and she said she loves it for making sweet rolls, and she makes wonderful sweet rolls. And I'm going to put in, just because I like a little color to my bread, I'm using some of the Sunrise Heritage wheat from over in North Branch that they use at the farm table too. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful flour. And I try to get organic from King Arthur, but all their flour is kind of hard to get right now. So I do have nice unbleached bread flour. Let's see if you can see, I'm just putting those ingredients together. And we're going to add an egg. All right. Now we're going to continue to add flour. I'm going to put our salt in. Very important. This bread raises so high that you really need salt, or it's going to just, gosh darn, jump right out of the pan. It's such a fast-working bread on its own. And the whole theory behind it is that this water roux is a method of you cook the flour, and the flour captures the water, and then you put that into your bread, and it keeps the bread moist for like a week. It gives you an amazing shelf life, plus a beautiful loaf of sandwich bread. Yeah, that's she's getting it there, and I can kind of show you just cooking that flour and water we made. When you can see the bottom of the pan, you know you're there. Now you have to let that cool. And then I made one up ahead of time. Yep. And I was trying to think of how did the Japanese or Chinese people think of this? I thought to myself, you know, they were making bread and they were putting up wallpaper, maybe, and they had wallpaper paste left over and just said, flour and water, throw it in the bread. And so that's what we're going to do. We just mix it right in. You kind of see. I've got everything in there, I think. Milk, yeast, sugar, egg, salt, red flour. Oh, the last thing, and it goes in last. Every time, which I couldn't really figure out why, but I'm always trying to figure out the reason why we do things. A lot of times you could. So I use about half a stick of butter. We're just going to mix that up. Now I'm going to put this on the KitchenAid. It's going to need more flour. And when you're mixing on a KitchenAid, I would say timetable, you want to let it go for 7 minutes. We're not going to, I have a separate one that's already mixed. But we have to finish that. Take that. Right. Now, to continue my story of my morning, I made my bread. I've been making this bread about every other week since about May, and every loaf just turns out wonderful. It kind of looks like this. I'll show you how you roll it. The traditional roll is 3 rolls. So your bread comes like this, and then there's one more here, This is a week old and it's still soft and fresh. I've been breaking off one end and giving it to the kids to take home, and then I have bread for a couple weeks. And I might eat one and put one in the freezer. So that's what we're supposed to look like. And then today, I have this. Can you see? It's huge and high, but we're all black on top because with this super fast yeast, I checked that I should have plenty of room in the oven. I was going to lower the shelf down one more, but I thought, there's plenty of room there. It wasn't that high over the pan. And then when I put it in, and then very shortly I could smell this getting way too dark on top. And so it was because of this super fast, powerful yeast and my oven shelf. I could have put the shelf down lower, but you can still see this is just such a soft, really nice, wonderful sandwich bread. It slices wonderful, and it will keep really fresh tasting and soft for a whole week, which I think that's wonderful because I love my sourdoughs and my sourdoughs and all the different focaccia breads and like that. But sometimes you just want a softer sandwich loaf, and this has just, I thought it's just been perfect. And it makes wonderful, wonderful toast as well. And I think I'll just cut off the top because the bottom is just fine. It's so soft. Now when you're going to put it, the way you finish it is there a, let's see, my knife. Oh, here it is, my dough knife. So you want to cut it in thirds. I made this earlier and I put it in the fridge so it wouldn't get so out of hand because it's really hard to control it here and have it jump right out of the bowl. And then if you should, the one time I made it, I forgot to put the salt in, and the salt is the one thing that kind of holds the yeast back too. So it was like I rolled it up, put it in the bread pan, and it was almost out of the pan in less than half an hour. So here we have, you just take roll it up into 3 little parts. Gotcha. Take that here. All right, my window covering. All right. We're going to stir a pan. And then we're just going to tuck these in like that. And this is just what that one looked like when I tucked it in this morning. Just like this. And then she went crazy. But set that there. And are there any questions?
Yeah, Terry, what was the specific kind of Sunrise Flour Mill flour that you used?
That was the Heritage Whole Wheat.
Great, thank you. Heritage Whole Wheat. Yeah, they have a lot of really interesting flours, folks. You can buy stuff at Farm Table from them. We support them because it's all organic and all heritage, no hybrid grains. And it's some people find that if they're gluten intolerant, they actually can use those breads made with their flour with no problem.
Right. Yep. That's kind of their personal story, is that they, as I remember, that they did have problems with gluten, and then had a chance to eat bread that was made with organic flours, and that they found they didn't get sick. And I've heard that story also from people traveling in Europe and in countries where they're very fussy about the flour they use in their bread. In France, people who couldn't eat any bread here without having digestive issues could eat bread for a week in France and not have any problem at all. So it's much depends on your ingredients and having really good ingredients. And that's why I think that you make it yourself. When you make it yourself, don't go cheap side on the flours and sugars. And that's the reason that you're making it, is because you want it to be better than what you can buy.
Many times I find myself using flour that I get from online. And either it's organic or some from France, or a very good, reputable grower in this country. And so when I make French bread, I need excellent yeast and flour and good well water. And I
Absolutely.
by the way, Terry, when making bread, I add the salt after everything's mixed. Then
Yeah.
I add the salt, then it doesn't interfere with the yeast.
Exactly right. Exactly. And that's why I do put in everything else almost. And then when you have your yeast at least the yeast molecules are all surrounded by some dough, then that offers some protection.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And Terry, someone also had a question, just the dimensions of that pan.
This is a Pullman pan, so I don't know that. Give me a measure. I was trying to think if that's 18 by 4. My son has been measuring our windows today. It's 13 and a half by 4.5. Yeah, these standard Pullman pans are excellent. Also, if you want a square-shaped loaf, they come with colors, so you can control, if you want just an exact square piece of bread.
Great. And, like David did, since we're a relatively small class tonight, if you want to unmute yourself, people, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Otherwise, feel free to type them in and I'll convey them to Terry.
How long do you let the bread rise?
Stuff is just, usually you figure an hour for the first rise, and this bread it is not necessary to do a second rise, but I have been. I'm used to doing a second rise. You wouldn't have to. You could work it like the same as like sweet rolls, and then your second rise would be in the pan, and that can be half hour to 45 minutes when it comes to the top of the pan. And if it's already over the pan by quite a bit, be sure and move your oven rack down because it's still going to raise some more. Now, sometimes people put an egg wash on top. I haven't. I'm used to I just take and spray some water on top and put it in, and that keeps the top crust from setting too quickly, keeps it moist, and so you will get your oven spring. Of course, I really didn't need to do that this morning with my oven spring right to the roof of my oven. So, this is my bread. I think I'm going to cut that off. And I will save this for my ravens that come every day. And I often throw them out a couple pieces of bread. And if I'm not watching it's gone immediately. And sometimes our two friend rabbits, Brad and Matter, which is like Brad, only more so, they will come and chow down on the bread if the ravens haven't got there yet. So all will find a home and all will get eaten no matter what. So, but it's such a soft, wonderful, it smells wonderful, it smells up the kitchen wonderful, and just that trick of cooking some flour so it with the water, and then somehow it holds the water so that you have a moister bread. And how they thought of it, I don't know. It's all chemistry.
Terry, it's good to see that once in a while even you make a mistake.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought, oh my God, I got to show people this. And then I thought, well, gosh darn, that stuff happens. Even if you've been making this bread for months, every other week, or if you've been making bread for 50 years, this stuff happens to the best.
Even Julia Child admitted that she never
just the way
told
it is.
anyone around the dinner table what this should be. She always just covered it up with parsley.
I didn't hear the end of that.
She just covered it up with cut up parsley.
Oh, parsley will save the day. Yep.
Wonderful to be a part of the crowd. So thank you.
That's so nice that you got it all figured out. Great.
Are there any other questions folks have about either the gazpacho or the bread or the story behind the bread or the soup? What brand of wine vinegar do you use?
Well, I've really been liking this. Oh, here it is. Okay. This is called Madhava Clean and Simple Organic Red Wine Vinegar. And yeah, it was available at Marketplace here in the organic section. And it's really nice. And for olive oil, I use that, or else if I have a lot to use, I also use for cooking the Kirkland brand organic because it's pretty darn good also. You don't want to ever go and get those light olive oils or any of the regular store. You got to go extra virgin organic, and because it can come up with a really sharp taste in your food that you're not expecting if you don't have a quality olive oil. And especially if you're going to blend it, that will tend to give it kind of almost a burnt, bitter flavor when you're blending olive oil. So it's really important to taste your olive oil, get an olive oil that you like.
Terry, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand the brand there for the wine vinegar.
It's called Madhava, Madhava.
Thank you.
So, yeah, don't buy, and then I was going to pull that one line on the refrigerator, the pink one. Yes. We have not had our supper yet here, so we're going to have some gazpacho, and I selected this. Rodney Strong has a rosé of Pinot Noir, which I tasted a couple of weeks ago and thought it was just so excellent. And I think that this would just go perfectly with this gazpacho. It's a dry wine. It's just quite beautiful. It's a Russian River Valley wine, and I find that if you find some that come from the Russian River Valley of California, it's always just been really excellent. The worst thing is that a lot of times the prices are really high, but this was much more reasonable.
And you said that's a Pinot Noir?
Yes, but it's a pink one. So it's something new to me, and I thought with our kind of pink, it would go really nice. Rodney Strong is my favorite wines these days. Everything else doesn't taste quite as good. So I think we could do Julia Child's Bon Appetit.
Once again, sort of the hard part of these classes not being together, we can't taste now.
We should all have a bowl, you know.
Thank you, Terry. Are there other questions people have, again, about the bread or the gazpacho?
The one thing I didn't mention is it's usually better if you chill it for a couple hours, but room temperature works.
And folks, I will send out a link to the video recording so you can rewatch this if you want. And I'll resend that recipe that Terry sent to, just in case you didn't get it or couldn't open it, and maybe you could this time. So hopefully I'll get that out to you tomorrow.
That when I buy flour in bulk, I get Sir Lancelot, and it's high gluten, but it really is excellent for French bread.
It really does. You notice it from the first time you buy a really good flour. You notice it. This flour that I used today is 12.7% protein. It's a good strong bread flour.
Well, folks, if there are no other questions, just to let you know that in a month or so, Terry will be teaching the third of her special series on Swedish cream cakes.
September is the month for princess cake in Sweden. The third week of September, they sell hundreds of thousands of princess cakes, and half of the money from the sales goes to support children's hospitals in Sweden. And it was because the cake was named for the princesses in Sweden in 1912. There were 2 princesses, and their nanny made a special dessert that had all their favorite things.
Terry, I
so
see
you can
you're
join us
drinking
on September 15 for that class. Check out our website for other upcoming classes. I did want to highlight we have a really accomplished, excellent instructor, a new instructor starting out with us in September. Her name is Jenny Breen, B-R-E-E-N. She teaches at University of Minnesota and elsewhere. And she'll be teaching some classes that I think will be really good at like emphasizing whole foods and what you need in your pantry in this kind of stressful time where you don't have to go out to get a lot of things. What do you need in your pantry to create really healthy, delicious, and low-cost meals? So she'll be teaching a couple classes, September and October, along those lines. And then, of course, another class on soil health in October, a class on coffee and how that connects to climate change, the kind of coffee we drink, and how that might connect to climate change in November. So quite a wide array of classes coming up in the next few months. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Terry, there are people saying thank you via chat, so always appreciate seeing you. And Joe,
Thank you.
Nubia, Joe is Terry's son and Nubia's
Yeah,
daughter.
they can take
They've been helping out.
over here. They help me out. My son and daughter-in-law are helping me out tonight.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. And I'm glad that at least you get to enjoy the soup and wine and bread with Terry now. So,
Okay.
all right. Well, thank
Okay,
you for
bye-bye.
joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night and take
Bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.